Welcome back to Ozarks News Journal. Today we are taking an in-depth look at the state of the news industry in America. In this segment, we're going to take a look at broadcast journalism.
Brad, we'll direct this one to you. What's going on in general in broadcast journalism?
Well, over the last year, we have seen companies big and small go through what I would call right-sizing. You may call it downsizing, but certainly right-sizing, figuring out what's the right number of people you need to run an operation. That's been a push of that has been certainly declining ad revenues, particularly in the automotive field, but also as stations look at the possibilities with new technology. Particularly on the internet. Where do stations need to be realigning their resources? How many people does it actually take to put on a newscast? And how many people do we need to continue to produce the quality of product that we want to put out?
The quality of the product that's coming out, we've seen a lot more of the infotainment news. And are you seeing more of a shift from hard investigative news to soft news and celebrity gossip?
Well, there's certainly an appetite out there, and whether it's fueled by TMZ or some of the stuff that's on cable news, there's certainly an appetite for that. But at the same time, with news being such a commodity and so ubiquitous, I can go to 10 different places and get the same story. So what's going to set my news product apart? Well, it's going to be the resources that I put behind investigative journalism, whether it's digging into consumer issues, whether it's digging around City Hall. Those are the stories that other places are not going to invest the time and the energy into and are going to set my product apart. So there's still an appetite out there.
Are you seeing more of a shift as we move with this modern technology? Are people going out and it's just a matter of let's just get the news out, let's get it and go? What are you seeing with the accuracy of the news that's being reported today?
Well, speed is certainly important, and the internet has fueled that because they have the ability to get information when I want it on my own terms, whether it's on my cell phone or in my web browser or Twitter or Facebook, however it is. Speed has become an important value and something that stations who have been so geared toward deadlines of the 5 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, the deadline is always now. And so there has to be a shift in the culture and how you operate your newsroom. At the same time, stations are looking at how can we use technology to improve in areas where we're deficient, be it the internet, and how can we use technology to enable us to do things better and more efficient. And looking at the studio here, there's about 10 people who are helping put this show on. If technology can get that number down to 2 or 3, I've then got additional resources that I can absorb as savings and profit, or I can reinvest those into content production.
And how are you seeing the 24-hour news channels affect your product specifically?
Well, it certainly, as we address national and world news, we have to consider what role do local stations have in producing that, because with the availability of information, not just on cable news, but on the internet as well, 24 hours a day, how often, what kind of resource does a local newscast need to be for national and international stories? It used to be we used to compete against the local stations. Now we compete against everything all the time. So our product, our local newscasts are competing up against your Jon Stewarts, your Keith Olbermans, your Bill O'Reilly, which certainly have a more flair for how to be entertaining than a local newscast would be. And that's certainly the brand that Fox and MSNBC and Comedy Central want to present. But how do we compete with that? How do we make local news relevant enough, important enough to people that they will choose that product over something else?
With this push for immediacy and content, how do you feel that that's doing towards accuracy of how the news is reported and the credibility of the news stations and sources?
To me, it's not even as much about accuracy as it is thoroughness. With the pressure to report things immediately, one of the things that often goes by the wayside is making sure we have all of the facts so we can tell a complete story in a way that makes sense. We just wanted to do it quickly. Before the internet came along, you had basically television, which did a great job of giving people the main idea of a story quickly and could report it immediately. They didn't have to wait a whole day. The advantage that newspapers had was that they could do things in depth and that they could have a little more time to be a little bit more reflective and explaining. So you had one medium that was good at one thing, one that was good at another. Now everybody has jumped into the pool of immediacy on the web. If anything, I think it has perhaps reduced the competitive advantage of the newspaper organizations who are now doing news online, because it's making them do something that they were not ever good at or trained to do before. So it's a challenge.
When you take a look at broadcast in general, you're seeing salaries decreasing and the news veterans asked to retire early. You're seeing television ratings decline. Brad, what do you think is causing this trend?
Well, it's about money. Everything's about money. If I can pay an anchor $100,000 or $60,000 and I get the same result, I'm going to pay the $60,000. That's a short-term benefit for the company. The long-term implication is going to play itself out because these anchors that are being jettisoned because of their huge salaries had viewer equity. When I had a choice to watch a story on 3 or 4 different channels, if there's somebody that I liked for whatever reason, then I'm going to watch that person. I'm going to trust that person. That person's been in my living room or my kitchen for years and years. That's why I made the choice to choose this station. Now the person's no longer there. It's an opportunity for competitors to come in and say, look at our product. That guy's not there anymore. That guy or gal's not there anymore. Sample us. We're just as trustworthy. We're just as accurate. We're better at what we do. And so what you hope as a station is that you've built your company's brand strong enough that it can survive a change of talent. Some have, some haven't. And I think particularly this year, as a large number of veteran anchors have retired or been fired, we will begin to see play out over the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years how much viewer equity they have and how valuable an anchor really is to a television station's success.
When I hear you mentioning money a lot, and we saw these things starting to happen before the big economic crisis hit, but with the constant focus on money, do you think that's really affecting journalistic content?
Well, certainly the ability of a company, whether it's a broadcast television station, a radio station, or a newspaper, the ability to have money coming in to help support the resources that go toward the content that you produce. There is a firewall there for good reason in good companies, but there still is a relationship that exists there. If I'm not producing content that people want, then people aren't going to consume my product and I'm not going to make any money. If I'm not making any money, then I can't produce the content that I want. So there's an important relationship there that certainly is tested in times like these because it's very easy to get rid of that firewall. And even companies were doing this before the economic downturn of eliminating that firewall, and certainly that then puts into question your credibility and your trustworthiness.
We have a similar situation in newspapers. Just jump in on here a second. Very similar situation. What we're seeing now, using the news leader as an example, veteran people, Steve Kaler, Sarah Overstreet, gone, and in their place, no local professional opinion journalist, in the case of Sarah Overstreet, and in the case of Steve Kaler, well, we had a certain level of coverage of higher education, and now we have a different level. And so, you may not have known what Steve Kaler looked like, but we know what coverage of higher education looks like now that he's gone.
Absolutely. Do you all see news as a public service still?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Without question.
Okay, yes or no, 10 years from now, will all television reporters be one-man bands who not only shoot and edit their own stories, but write online versions of their stories as well? Brad?
Not all of them, but we're walking down that path.
Jack?
I agree with Brad.
I agree, not all but a bunch.
Okay. Coming up, where's all this leading? We'll look into convergence and the role of the internet in the news of tomorrow. Stay with us.
I think newspapers will probably be gone before too long, but I think people are going to have to figure out a way to make money off of online news.
Like, I use the internet to only look at news like when I have to write a paper or something.
I am concerned that somebody reads something on the internet and say, well, it's on the internet, therefore it's true. And I don't necessarily think that's accurate.